Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really glad that you're here. My name is Shweta Arya, and I'm the Executive Director of Delaware Interfaith Power and Light. For those of you who don't know, we are a faith-based environmental nonprofit working with our communities of faith and community stakeholders in addressing the biggest crisis humanity is facing today, that is climate change. This is one of our core programs. It's called Climate Conversation. And this is our 45th climate conversation that's taking place. This program is funded by Energize Delaware, which is a nonprofit that was created by State of Delaware. You can check out their website, energizedelaware.org. They help businesses, nonprofit, and residences get energy efficient and climate resilient. We're very thankful for their support. And today's climate conversation is also co-hosted by United Way of Delaware. So thank you, Ken, for co-hosting this with us.
I'm sorry, Joan, there's also a what?
Please keep yourself muted.
The meeting's just beginning with a bunch of chit chat stuff.
I don't know what it is that you're on.
Please. All right, everybody, please keep yourself muted if you not have already done that. We'll really appreciate that. So really excited about today's topic, that is the electric school bus solution. And we're so excited that we have subject matter experts here with us on the panel. Some are joining from out of town, some are from here in Delaware. So really excited to get this started. You know, I have recently just learned about electric school buses, and through this, just preparing for this climate conversation, I have been digging into it, learning all the more. And I have learned that this can be, you know, how incredible this transition can be. We'll talk more in detail, but just as a mom of 2 young kids, I have been putting my kids on school buses since they were kindergartners. They're 12 and 14 now. And just learning about how polluting these diesel buses and even natural gas buses are to our children's health. You know, so just as a mother, it just infuriates me that I've never known about this. But now we have solutions in front of us, right? So we are going to talk about that. And without any further ado, I'm going to get us started. Michael, if you can move to the next slide, please. So just basic housekeeping rules, please keep yourself muted. And if you have any questions, we'll be taking questions at the end. Please put the questions in the chat and we'll take them at the end. And now I'm going to introduce our guest speakers. We're so excited that we have so many different subject matter experts joining us. Allison Wiley, she's a senior specialist with electric school buses. She's also a project manager of the Electrification, Education, and Equity Project. She writes Electrifying Transit, an e-newsletter that supports public transits moving from diesel to electric buses. If you get a chance, please check out that newsletter. I have signed up for that, and that has just amazing information. From 2008 to 2017, Allison worked for the Public Transit Division of the Oregon Department of Transportation. There she led the governor's Commuters Challenge to a successful carbon reducing conclusion. Our next guest is Tim, and I don't want to Tim Forker. Tim, am I right, or did I pronounce it wrong? Tim?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
It'll work.
All right, Tim Forker. All right. He is currently a superintendent at Williams Field Schools in Illinois. He's also a senior advisor with World Resource Institute with their electric school bus initiative. He has worked in public education for 25 years. He's also the administrative lead in the Bus to Grid initiative. Our next speaker is Richard Johnson, who is the Strategic Accounts Manager for Nuve Holdings, a San Diego, California-based company. Prior to Nuve, he worked for Autoport Incorporation in Newcastle, Delaware, where the company was involved in the development of the current vehicle-to-grid technology with the University of Delaware. Beginning in 2010, Dick worked with the university to perform the first proof of concept that showed a vehicle battery could be used to store and transmit power back and forth to the grid. Our next guest is Dr. Anna Quinzel, a retired family physician. She has worked in urgent care, preventative care, and medical research. Motivated by the intersection of health and environment, she's working to preserve wilderness spaces that protect clean water, clean air, and biodiversity. Currently a member of the League of Women Voters and Land Use and Transportation Committee. She's also a member of the Mid-Atlantic Alliance for Climate and Health, also part of the Wilmington Public Advisory Committee. And she's just finishing a master's degree from the Duke University Environmental Leadership Program. So welcome, and we'll be hearing from everybody. And last but not least, Francine Davis. She's a member of the Peninsula Delaware Conference, United Women in Faith, where she serves as the mission coordinator for membership, nurture, and outreach, and the Delaware District. And she's the communications coordinator for the Delaware District, drawing purpose and inspiration from her faith, family, and circle of friends. Francine is passionate about the advocacy work she does through United Women in Faith's Just Energy for All campaign. And with that, I would like to now invite our guests. So Michael, please help me put spotlight on all our guest speakers. All right. And Michael, if you can stop sharing that screen for me, that will be great. And let me see. Anna. And who's left? All right. Sounds good. So why don't we get started with, we'll go around and each one of you can share just a little bit about what brings you here and what do you have to say about electric bus transition. So Anna, Dr. Anna Quinzel, would you like to go first? There's so many perspectives here that we can talk about, but I'd like to start with the health, health argument for going to electric. So let's start with you.
Okay, yeah. So is it okay to share my screen and share a few slides? So a lot of the points I have to make are really best kind of written down or shown in a diagram. So it's helpful to see some slides. So can you see my slides?
Yes.
Buses and health. Okay, great. Yeah, so just really quickly more about me. I found these two articles in the same paper, the same week, 2 weeks ago in the Wilmington News Journal, and they sort of summarize why I care about this topic. So number one, as Shweta described so nicely, our climate change situation is becoming increasingly dire, and physicians are getting, and healthcare workers in general are getting pretty energized because we see a solution now that's viable. So the article about the World Health Organization talks about the air pollution impact of the fossil fuels that we're burning that are leading to climate change. So turns out air pollution and climate change travel hand in hand. And if we can fix our air pollution problems, we also fix climate change and vice versa. So electrifying our transportation is going to be a solution to so many issues for us. And we're going to see our health benefits a lot sooner than we'll see the climate change benefits, in fact. So children are especially vulnerable to pollution from air, pollution of all kinds, but we're focusing on air today. So children, because they're just developing their kidneys, which help clean our bodies, their livers, they're not able to detoxify as effectively as adults. In addition, children are just consuming more of what they need for life than we are for the size of their bodies. So they're breathing in more, like they're just breathing more than adults are per body size. So they're taking in proportionately more air pollution than adults. So just to give you an idea of why air pollution from diesel in particular, but all fossil fuel combustion. So combustion means fire. So we're burning fuels to power our vehicles right now. And that those combustion products lead to all sorts of things going into the air. So those include these tiny particles, which a lot of research is now revealing a lot of the health problems focus around tiny particles. So they're known as particulate matter 2.5, which means that they're tiny, 2.5 microns in size, which is, I'll show, well, I actually don't have it here. It's much, much smaller than the diameter of a hair. And so that is, part of that is it's soot, and it's especially emitted by diesel engines. Ozone is released when we burn fossil fuels, volatile organic compounds like benzene and formaldehyde, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are known as PAH, and they're things that they're large compounds that just lodge in our bodies and have been found to be carcinogenic. Polycyclic, nitrogen oxides are otherwise known as NO2, NOH, and they lead to, especially it looks like activation of asthma. They sort of maybe are the causative agent for asthma, we're not sure yet. And then carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, of course. So these things, we breathe them in when we breathe smoke, and they travel down our airways, and the very smallest particles in the gases travel all the way to the ends of our airways. And you can see here that the blood vessels pick up whatever we're breathing in, including oxygen, which we want, but also picking up all these gases and particles, the tiny, tiny particles that we're breathing in, and they travel right into our tiny blood vessels and then travel right into our major organs. So the brain, the liver, and of course, they're dispersing widely in the lungs. So buses in particular, well, all vehicles, but buses are especially concentrating the exhaust that they themselves are releasing. It's called auto exhaust. So they're bringing the exhaust into the bus through, it looks like opening the bus doors. Every time the bus doors open and close, the exhaust gets sucked in. Buses just seem to be leaky. And in addition, when buses sit and idle, they especially concentrate pollution into the cabins. So when they measure the amount of pollution inside a bus, it's 3 to 12 times more of, in particular, this one study I looked at showed particulate matter 2.5, PM 2.5, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So the ambient air was the air away from the road. So the air in the bus was 3 to 12 times higher than the air away from the road. And studies show that, in fact, like you might ask, well, is the road air just as dirty as inside the bus? Well, a study comparing buses to cars showed that in buses, it's even 2 to 3 times more exhaust exposure in a car than in a bus. I'm sorry, in a bus than in a car. So it's exceeded in a bus and compared to a car. And so that shows that the air in the surroundings is very likely itself polluted and then even more concentrated in buses. And the other thing about buses is that they're traveling through neighborhoods at a high rate. So they're stopping at frequent stops throughout the neighborhoods that they're traveling in. And when there's a lot of bus stops in a neighborhood, which tends to happen in urban neighborhoods, and the more kids that are riding a bus in a neighborhood, the more impact it's having. So not only is it impacting the kids riding the buses, and by the way, typical bus rides sounds like 45 minutes for kids on average. So they're on the bus for quite a while. And a question comes up around the type of fuel that a bus is using. So it is true that methane burning, so CNG is, it's nitrogen, it's natural gas, and diesel is on the right. So the natural gas is releasing just as much as it's burned, just as much VOC compounds as diesel. So that's formaldehyde, benzene, and a couple of others that all lead to irritation of the lungs and potentially cancer over the long term. But the natural gas powered buses do have less of a particulate component than the diesel. The amount of carbon dioxide, so the amount of warming potential that is being released through the burning of the natural gas versus diesel is pretty comparable. So what are the health impacts? So diesel is particularly bad. It's difficult to study the exact impact of a diesel bus. So there haven't been studies comparing kids who ride in diesel buses to
I just want to let
wrap
you
up
that.
Yeah. All right. Well, so our government's been trying to do the right thing in buying cleaner diesel buses, which do show improvements for kids as far as asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia. So this is the closest we've gotten to really determining whether diesel buses are causing problems for kids. And in addition, when they look at fossil fuel combustion in general, there's a whole bunch of problems ranging from lung problems, asthma, to cognitive problems, including autism and ADD, higher weight, preterm birth and low birth weights, and also high rates of cancer, it looks like. So that was all I wanted to share.
Thank you, Anna. That was, that was real. That really spelled it out so clearly. So thanks for showing that. Now I will invite Allison. Would you like to share your perspective? I know you write this wonderful blog and you have a newsletter, and you have been in this industry, for a while. What do you have to say about electrifying our school buses?
Oh, thank you, Shweta. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm honored to be on a panel with so many really smart, passionate people. So I've worked in low carbon transportation for about 16 years. And then in about 2016, I realized, the lowest carbon transportation is an electric bus with no emissions. And so I've been focusing on electric buses and now electric school buses for quite a few years. I write the newsletter and I engage with school districts. And I try to help convince those who manage the school bus fleets to start to electrify. And as you can imagine, only a relatively few are interested. There's almost 500,000 school buses in our country. Almost all of them are internal combustion. There's maybe 700 electric school buses on the road, and that's 13,500 school districts nationwide. So you and me and all of us are at the beginning of something that's big and important. And Anna's presentation helped us realize how important this transition is. I'm a person of faith, and sometimes I go into the why of why I've landed here in advocating for electric school buses. It's everything that Shweta and Anna have talked about, climate and health, and it's especially here that we're talking about the health of the people who are the most vulnerable, not just because they're children, but the children who are riding the school buses are generally the lowest income children. And that public access to education is crucial. And so I never actually, to be honest, I don't in my advocacy talk a lot about the badness of the diesel buses, because when I did that once, a transportation director of a school bus fleet who is getting her first electric school bus, she came right back at me and she said, Allison, I bleed yellow. Don't be talking about the diesel school buses being bad because the kids still have to ride them. And so I backed off a little bit and I push for electric school buses. But as I talk to certain people, like the people who use the buses and drive the buses and ride the buses, I talk about how good electric is. And I generally avoid how bad diesel is with that particular audience. The last thing I'll say, and this will go around because I want to hear from all my wonderful fellow panelists. The good news is that there's a whole lot of federal funding right now for electric school buses. And that is coming from the Environmental Protection Agency. And it's $5 billion over 5 years. And half of that is dedicated specifically to electric school buses. And they're going to be singling out the school districts that are having the hardest time. We can help districts to apply for these funds. And that's part of my job, is helping districts apply for the funds to start to electrify. We have a long road ahead of us, and I'm glad that there's a lot of us who are engaged in this. That's all I've got for the moment. Thanks, Shweta.
Thank you. Wonderful, Allison. We look forward to having this little bit more discussion. We'll get into that after we go around. So I'll go to Richard Johnson. I know you started this technology of, it's just amazing that you work with the University of Delaware for this vehicle to grid technology, and I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so I work for a company that actually originated from the University of Delaware. So I've been in Delaware for a long period of time, and like everybody on this program, I'm passionate about us getting electrification in Delaware. And so let's see if I can change slides. So I go back to 2009, 2010, when this gentleman, Dr. Willa Kempton at the University of Delaware, showed up at my office at Autoport and said, hey, can you do conversion of electric vehicles? That was way ahead of the time. And I said, why would you even want to do that? And he talked about this technology he was working on called vehicle to grid. So I got really fascinated with that. He'd written a paper on it, and he just needed somebody to do the conversion. So at Autoport, we actually did a lot of conversions back in 2009, 2010, when it wasn't the popular thing, to do a proof of concept for the University of Delaware to show that you could actually use vehicles as stationary power source. Okay. So basically, what we did is the first vehicles we did are up on the upper left-hand corner, which is a Scion XB, and we converted them from gasoline to electric with a kit. So we did 7 of those vehicles, and that was our first proof of concept where we showed that you could actually exchange electricity bidirectionally running back to PJM, which is the grid operator for our area, and actually make money doing that because they paid for it. So basically what you do is establish those 7 vehicles as a virtual power source. So the next people that got involved was BMW with their minis, and we brought 20 minis up from Mexico, converted them over to vehicle to grid capability and leased them out through the state of Delaware. Because the one thing that the technology that he wanted to prove is that you could aggregate the vehicles. So we were able to take 20 vehicles at different locations throughout the state and aggregate them into a single power source that actually fed power to PJM. And then the next thing we did is we did the first electric postal vehicle. We were one of 5 companies that converted that. And then Comcast was very interested at that time in converting vehicles over to electric, so we did that. So it was way ahead of its time, and now we're actually in the time, so it's pretty exciting. So if you go back in time, I talked about 1996, vehicle to grid technology started then. Nuvve basically incorporated and licensed the technology from the University of Delaware. So it all originated here. And then in 2019, 20, and 21, and now, we're actually very involved in placing not vehicles as much as we are chargers and software to actually do vehicle to grid. So coming up was mentioned is there's a ton of money coming up from the infrastructure bill, and the EPA is releasing this on they have a webinar on the 27th, which talks exactly about what funding will be available. So there is a lot of funding, and there's a lot of states planning the funding and how they're going to spend it. I'm not sure Delaware has yet. So just to talk a little bit, so you know, a grant will get you a bus, but the key here is a bus is only half the picture. Because when I'm talking to people, you can get a grant and you can get 45, 50% off on the bus, but the next thing you've got to do is actually do the infrastructure. So you might buy a bus for $300,000, but your infrastructure cost could be 60 or more. So one thing that people don't budget for is that, and Tim could talk more about that than I. So vehicle to grid, what is it? Basically, it's a software package that communicates with the grid. And the grid is not Delmarva. The grid is PJM, which is up in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which controls the electricity grids from south of New York all the way down to Virginia, out to Chicago. So basically they make sure that the lights stay on. What buses become is then a stationary source for the grid. So if they need power, rather than shoot or start up a power station or a natural gas station to bring electricity, and they can draw it instantaneously out of the buses. It only works with our technology in terms of using a charger that flows power both directions. In other words, it can flow into the bus and it can flow out of the bus. Now, the software is set up so that when Tim's group is ready to run their buses, it's always available at whatever time in the morning, if it's 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock. But during the period of time that's parked during the night or during the summer, it's actually doing vehicle to grid and earning money. So one of the keys here is vehicle to grid can offset the cost of operating the bus also, or offset the cost of purchasing the bus. So I have some states, I go up and down the East Coast, that some states pay up to like $12,000 a bus, down to about $5,000 a bus per year. So and it's a continuing thing. And as we go to more sustainable energy and wind energy, we'll need more storage capacity. So that's why it's really important now. Not only, I think the key here for me is the health issue. The technology is cool, but really the health issue is the key.
Thank you, Dick. That was amazing. That's, I'm sure a lot of people didn't know about that. I recently came to know about that, and we definitely can explore that more in the discussion. And now I would like to invite Francine. Francine, why don't you share your perspective? And I know you talk very passionately about just transition to energy. So please, stage is all yours.
Hello, everyone. Shweta, thank you for inviting me this evening. So I am representing United Women in Faith, which is a new brand. We're formerly known as United Methodist Women. So United Methodist Women is an organization of women of faith who are deeply committed to advocating for social justice on issues that affect women, children, and youth. So today I'm representing United Women in Faith, and we're advocating for 100% renewable energy that is cleaner and more just for all of God's people and creation. And of course, we go by what the good book says, be good stewards of the earth, right? Because we want to take care of that which God has blessed us with. And I hope everyone's okay with me. I see Allison, she's giving me the high five there. So yes, so I work in education, over 10 years in education, and I worked mainly with students who have multiple disabilities. So I have already heard, you've already heard from Dr. Anna, and of course from Richard on what it looks like when buses are idling at the curbside as you're getting your students ready to board the bus, and we're breathing all this fine particulate matter down. So I won't go back through the stats and the science behind it, but you're standing there as this toxicity brews. Now, there are anti-idling laws that we have here in the state of Delaware for diesel vehicles. So what we do as part of United Women in Faith is make sure that we educate our communities, we educate people. We're educated ourselves first. Then we are able to educate others so that they know what's going on around them. We educate them from the healthcare perspective. As Dr. Anna mentioned, we educate them on legislative issues and how to organize and advocate for themselves. So going to an EV infrastructure, specifically electric school buses, as we just heard, I think the statistic somewhere was 25 million. No, that can't be right. Let me see if I can find my number really quickly.
25 million kids.
Kids ride the bus, right? So thank you. Just wanted to make sure I was in the right
Every day. Yeah.
Every day. Multiple bus runs per day. So we want to make sure that the air quality around our schools and around our students are safe. So children are especially vulnerable to the dangerous health impacts of diesel pollution. They're exposed on their daily commutes to and from school, which make them more susceptible to asthma and chronic respiratory illnesses. Now, if I had kids that already had multiple disabilities, just think their respiratory airways are already compromised, right? So we want to make sure that the air quality that they're breathing is much healthier, because we've already heard there's the absentee rates that affect their overall academic performance. There are the days out of school. There are the hospital bills that families that often from communities of color and those marginalized communities can't always afford the healthcare impact that goes along with it. So we really do advocate for electric school buses. They're available. As we heard, they're already available for schools to consider. Getting the schools on board, as you heard Allison speak of, is sometimes a daunting task. It has not reached all states equally as of yet, and that's another issue that we're advocating for. Also making sure that the communities realize, and we'll talk about electric vehicles, just electric vehicles overall, the infrastructure that goes along with it. Make sure that it's affordable for everyone. You know, communities that are able to get the infrastructure in place will get incentives to make sure that our communities in our marginalized areas understand this and are able to come to the table and have a voice. As United Methodist Women, we advocate with our legislators to make sure that our voices are heard. And we rally around the communities who are oftentimes left behind. So as a resident of Delaware, we are focused on ambitious investments in clean vehicles. We speak to our legislators, we go to Leg Hall, and we fight for this because our children's health continues to suffer. We need our Congress to protect their health, to fight for climate change, and to take steps to invest in these cleaner vehicles, which today are our school buses that we're talking about.
Beautifully said, Francine, and I'm all with you. So definitely, I think you know, even 95% of our school buses out of like 480,000 buses are diesel, and you know, brewing this toxic fumes. And I think stats say that 70% of the low-income students use the buses versus 50% of the high income, because you know, sometimes they are transported by car or whatever. So, and they're there longer, you know. So there are definitely disproportionate impacts in underserved communities, and we'll talk about how we can center equity in this transition. But last but not least, I'm going to invite Tim to share his perspective. So Tim, you are a superintendent, and at your school, you have clean energy buses. So out of this whole crew, you are the person who actually have those buses in the school. So tell us your story, how you got started in this, and about vehicle to grid technology that you have in your schools.
Yeah, I'll clarify a little bit. So I'm the superintendent at Williamsfield Schools. If you're familiar with Illinois, we're about 30 miles west of Peoria. So we're very rural part of central Illinois. In our efforts to electrify, the price has been the barrier. The spirit's there, the price has been the barrier. I think it was either 3 or 4 years ago, we got our first electric school bus quote, and it was $400,000. And Bluebird was the only one that quoted. And we sought quotes from Thomas, Bluebird, and IC Bus, and that was 4 years ago. So we started trying to figure out creative ways to make it happen. Fast forward a few years, we decided one of the best ways to make it happen was to form a coalition. So we created the Bus to Grid initiative. It started in central Illinois with us and 7 of our neighboring school districts, and it expanded as opportunities arose. The first opportunity we came across was a grant opportunity through a settlement fund from a long polluting coal-fired power plant just on the south side of Peoria, the Edwards coal-fired power plant. Through their settlement that was due to air pollution, we were able to, with our coalition, write a grant that secured 2 electric school buses. Now, our school didn't get them, but 2 of our neighbors did, the ones that were closest to the power plant, which makes logical sense. Now, within the research for that grant opportunity, it became apparent to me, I was only interested in electrifying our buses, right? And the electricity that we utilize at that point in time, it was coming from that Edwards power plant. and had been for decades. So by us choosing to electrify, if that Edwards power plant were still in operation, it's not, but the coal-fired power plant in Pekin right across the river still is. That's still where we get our electricity. If we're just looking to electrify our school buses, we're just pushing the pollution upstream. And our neighbors on the south side of Peoria and in Pekin would be harmed due to our benefit of breathing clean air on our bus. So as we researched and put in an application for this grant, we decided taking a vehicle to grid approach was the most responsible approach to take. Because if we can, we did that with, we coupled it within an entire energy portfolio approach. So if we could install a solar array on campus here at Williamsfield Schools, and we can utilize buses to store that energy, and then we're going to pull less from whatever is being produced by the Powerton power plant in Pekin, which is still fired by coal. So all of that led to the formation of the Bus to Grid initiative, and the approach being not just to electrify school buses, but to electrify school buses in a way that supports renewable energy expansion. The key component in that is bidirectional energy flow. Interestingly, through our work, we've been able to get commitments, and it's not, I'm not saying that we were the ones that got the commitments. It's the work of Allison's group and the work of folks like Anna and Francine that led to this. But the major bus manufacturers now have all committed to bidirectional energy flow in all of their big Type C and Type D electric school buses. But in order to unlock that potential, you have to have the charging infrastructure that will allow that energy to flow both ways and call on that energy, that electricity, to charge or discharge based upon conditions within the grid or price points if you're looking to save money. So I want to fast forward to where we are now. As the administrative lead for the Bus to Grid initiative, Williamsfield Schools, we've got 2 buses, one in Hollis, one in Pekin. They're neighbors of ours. We helped write grants, submit grants for Volkswagen funding for several other school districts in Illinois, and we are working to help school districts apply, just like Allison is, for this clean school bus funding that's coming. But the approach that we are advertising and encouraging within all these applications, I'll do a quick screen share, is a microgrid type of approach. At Williamsfield Schools, we don't have the funding for the bus, but we did get funding through our State Board of Education for a school maintenance grant to cover $50,000 worth of electrical infrastructure to put in the charge stations that will allow our buses to be an energy storage component within a mini microgrid here on campus when we do get funding for or can afford to transition our fleet, which, knock on wood, is going to be relatively soon. So hopefully, let me try and reshare again here. Oh, I'm picking the wrong window, aren't I? Let me give it one more shot, guys. No, I'm failing. I'll just talk about it. So we've got a mini microgrid that we're developing here on campus. We have a solar array just north of our bus barn. It's a 204 kilowatt solar array. It's a single axis ground mount, and it produces about 80% of the energy that we consume right now. As we electrify our fleet, we're adding additional roof mount solar arrays so that we can produce the energy that we consume. We're adding electrical infrastructure out at our bus barn. We're adding a Nuvve charging system through Dick's company that will allow us to offload energy from our school bus batteries when we electrify, when it's intelligent to do so. And it will allow us to time the charge of those school bus batteries when it is intelligent to do so. We're adding charging stations outside the bus barn for public use or for guest school districts when they come to ball games, to be able to plug in while the kids are in plan and then be ready to transport kids home when the game is done. We're adding charge stations to our student lot and our employee lot and they will be open for public use, just like our Wi-Fi is. Folks can plug in and when they're at school and unplug when they leave. And the whole idea is to inspire further electrification, to be a model within our community, inspire electrification, and have available charge stations in rural areas so that rural areas don't get left behind. So that's our approach. We're looking to leverage the vehicle to grid component. We realize that as a school bus, as the district financial manager, a school bus is the second largest capital expense in a district behind our buildings. Our next largest expense is a school bus. So we want to get a little bit more out of this investment, because our school buses, I mean, just based upon mathematics, they sit still in our district 93% of the calendar year. They're just doing nothing. And we want to leverage the investment to get a little bit better of a return. And so we're electrifying for the reasons that Anna expressed. It's a healthier, it's a quieter, it's a smoother ride for our kids and for our drivers. But we're going to leverage these resources or these pieces of equipment within an overall energy portfolio that supports renewable expansion and saves the district money.
Yeah. Wow, that was just so great to hear from you. What I am hearing from you is you definitely have to form kind of a coalition, where you're working.
It helps.
To really get something going. So all we know, Anna, can I ask you, you're working with you're with League of Women Voters, and you're trying to see where we stand. Can you throw some light on where we stand in Delaware with our school bus transition to electric? What have you found so far?
Dick is even more at the forefront, but what I can say is that so far there has not been a organized approach from the state toward electrifying our school buses. And while there has been some energy around electrifying some of the transit buses in the city of Wilmington and maybe elsewhere in the state, which is exciting. So it shows we can do it. But as far as school buses, there will be federal funding available in May, and Delaware has not presented a plan yet for those funds. So there is a bit of a time crunch right now because states that do not present a plan will not get funding.
So maybe everybody who is joining us from Delaware should be contacting their elected official, contacting DEMREC to push on that, to think about that and have some answers. But definitely we need a coordinated effort to move some needles here in Delaware for sure.
There's definitely, so there's two areas. DENREC would be one, and the other one is the Secretary of Education. Those two areas, because right now there's no reimbursement for electric school buses in Delaware for anybody who buys one. Where in Tim's area in Illinois, they get depreciation for and operating costs on their vehicle over a 10-year period of time. And that happens in Delaware too with diesel and also propane, but not electric. And I think part of the pushback on that has been just the price of electric versus a diesel and a regular gas engine type vehicle.
Allison, you have any comment on that since you work with as a bigger picture of what
so it's true and it's documented that electric school buses have lower fuel costs and much less volatile fuel costs and less maintenance. I never pretend, though, that we're at a place where your fuel and maintenance savings are going to make up for the fact that the electric school bus costs 3 times as much as the diesel. You'd have to drive it 24/7 for years and years for that math to work. But then the cost of batteries is coming down and the electric school buses will become less expensive. I like the work that Tim and others are doing on vehicle to grid, Dick and Nuvi. Vehicle to grid has a lot of potential and it can help with that whole cost equation over time.
So I was in Florida recently, and I have not seen any statistical evidence of school buses and how much the savings is, but the person I was on a panel with actually had trash trucks, which are diesel trash trucks. Obviously, they cost $450,000 or more. And he got a DERA grant, which paid for 45% of it, which brought it down to what an electric with a diesel would normally cost. So when you looked at his operating costs, he basically broke even on the operating costs. Now, the DERA grant took $260,000 out of his initial costs, but he broke even in 6 years. He had less maintenance, obviously way less in terms of fuel costs. So the savings are there. And that's where I think vehicle to grid plays a role, because if you I've got a school district up in Rhode Island that the utility is going to pay them roughly $10,000 per bus per year, and they have 3 buses. So and they sit in the summer, and that's when they're getting them paid. So that's like $30,000 a year. So that offsets quite a bit of the cost.
But Dick, I'll get back to you on that, because I know you're helping some of the school districts write some grant, but I want to talk to Allison before she has to leave. I know she said she has to leave at 6:30. Allison, can you talk about the federal funding a little bit more here? Because we know, this transition to clean energy buses is a pretty expensive one, and then I know a lot of schools are so cash strapped already that they cannot think about that transition. So could you talk a little bit more about what kind of funding is available if Delaware schools were to think about it? What is a good way to go about that?
Yeah, so the funding applications from EPA are going to open up, either late this month or in May, and there'll be 3 months for people to apply. And one of the things that I'm working on in my latest newsletter is, here's the big competitor to electric, it's propane. And propane is somewhat cleaner than diesel. What we want to do is let people know that propane is not a friend to the climate. Electric has 0 emissions. Propane has all kinds of greenhouse gas emissions. And we want to encourage school districts to apply for funding for electric and not for propane. So that's something that I'm really encouraging, because funding is available for both. And the whole second pot of funding, people can go after electric or propane or renewable diesel. And we need to be pushing electric. So that's one of my advocacy plugs. I do see that John is saying, how can he advocate? I was starting to type a message. School boards are often decision makers. And so if you want to be advocating and influencing, you could contact your school board, and Tim might have a different idea than mine. So the transportation director will often be the one applying. They may or may not be open to your advocacy. They might need information. They probably don't even know where to go to see about the funding. It's epa.gov/clean school bus. So those are some of my best thoughts.
Thank you so much. And before Allison jumps off, is there any question in particular for Allison before she leaves? If you do, Naveed, I know you have a question. Do you want to share that?
Sure. Thank you, Shweta. This is Naveed Bakir. I'm a board member at Christina School District. So I brought up the issue of electric school buses, and it was immediately shut down because the math never worked. Apparently several months ago, a group of administrators at Christina School District looked into the possibility of this. There was no funding available, and the infrastructure cost was just too astronomical for them to consider this even as an experimental option. And then, I found out about this meeting that was happening today. So I sent out an email asking the administration to take another look at it. But what in a nutshell can we do as a board, in terms of initial funding and the operations? What can I do in my capacity as a board member to convince the administration and the other board members that we need to take steps, not just think about it?
Yeah. I'm sorry you got shut down on that first go. Here's one idea. I think that peers are the ones that we listen to the most. And so if you're on a school board, it sounds like you are. If I were you, I would get with school boards from elsewhere who are going down the path of electrifying, in the same way that I would get a transportation director who is electrifying to talk to another transportation director who's on the fence and needs some convincing. So that's my best strategy, is get a peer who is pro-electric school bus to convince their peers that they should start to apply for the funding. Without a funding source that's outside of your district, you won't get off the ground because the cost is 3x.
Yeah, let me answer that too, because we do have a VW grant in right now for Red Clay and Woodbridge, and hopefully that money comes through. So they'll be the first school districts in Delaware to get an electric bus if that goes through. So the key here is actually, we have a person who works with our company that helped them do their VW grants. So we've been writing a lot of, the only way you're going to get somewhere is, I can see where your school district would turn it down immediately when somebody walked in, the Bluebird dealer, and said it's only $365,000, and the guy's looking at you and said, but we're only paying $120,000 right now. So, my job, at least the way I look at it, is to really try to facilitate more grant money into our state and the states around here so that people can electrify, because I don't think you can electrify at this point without some kind of grant.
Can I?
Can you sharing information on the Red Clay School District grant that you are helping them with? Is it possible to get a little more information?
Yeah, we could actually get you the write-up of the grant. I mean, it's a public, it's through DNRAC, through the Clean Air Group. So we're basically working through that. We also put another one in for 5 trash trucks, which is Evergreen they're running a bunch, and he wanted to actually try for trash trucks. And when you start looking at trash trucks, those make school buses look cheap. So so we're hoping that, so we have 3 grants in right now with the state, plus another one for IG Burton. IG Burton wanted to put electric hub charging stations of 10 high-speed chargers on the way to the shore, just outside their auto dealerships. So we're, we're trying to pick away at it. And if you want us to help you, we'll be happy to jump right in. So we've helped Tim too. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Shweta, could you facilitate that communication?
Yeah, yeah, Naveed, I will definitely be in touch with you and connect you with Dick and Tim if needed. We definitely need more schools. And I think at this point, if there are other school district folks I hear, maybe if they can start the process together, it just, it just works so beautifully that way. But there was some questions in the chat that I want to take. were there any questions that were left out? I think most of them were answered.
I think Peggy had a question around the clean diesel, and it really segues with something Allison said about the climate change potential for propane, as she said, which is one of the technologies that Delaware has been investing in actually for cleaner buses, and then clean diesel. They both do, and the natural gas powered buses, they all do clean the air somewhat more than the old diesel buses. So by buying, new propane buses, school districts are helping kids to some degree. So that's why I put up the evidence around that showed fewer incidents of bronchitis and asthma with when you go from a very dirty diesel bus to a cleaner diesel. However, it just shows you the potential. Like if you could smell something in the air as a vehicle passes you by, that is a volatile chemical that is going into your body. So these buses are still making fumes. Electric buses do not make fumes. It's a real shift and will bring us so much health benefit. So the slippery slope here is that it's going to be cheaper to buy newer technologies that aren't electric. And yet that will not help at all with climate change and continues to cause some health effects. These technologies are newer, the studies haven't been done, but I was trying to show you, I could show you the diagram again that showed that I believe that natural gas is probably even cleaner than propane. Propane is more like a gasoline, it's a petroleum, and natural gas itself releases benzene and formaldehyde, and there's all these volatile chemicals that are still being released by any fossil fuel. And we just don't know as much about the long-term impacts of these. The dramatic effects from pieces of soot in your lungs outweigh the more subtle effects that we might see over the long term with these newer newer fossil fuel technologies. Does that answer, Peggy, does that help?
I'm not sure if Peggy is still online, but that was my question too, because a lot of people do question, right? And they talk about natural gas is so much better. But I feel like, when we are investing in our buses, might as well just invest in clean buses, because that infrastructure locks in all those, fossil fuel infrastructure just gets locked in for a decade. And we know we know that climate change has become such an urgent issue to tackle, and IPCC reports and all climate scientists have told us that we have 10 years to really turn things around. So we don't have the time to really play with less dirty fossil fuel infrastructure when we have a choice to move to something really clean, which is cleaner and quieter and does not harm our children's health. And that we have funding available. Thankfully, we have a president and a sitting president from Delaware who's right now, giving us funding for doing this all over the country. And it's shameful that in Delaware, we have no action around it. So hopefully we can mobilize, we can really work together and get some activity going. I know there is currently a Volkswagen's settlement money that a lot of states are getting, and Delaware has just been using that funding for cleaner diesel so far and has not gotten any clean energy bus. So these questions we need to ask, and I hope that more folks are aware. I think the number one thing we are trying to do in these climate conversations is creating awareness about these issues. Learning about them and seeing what kind of resources do we have, and then contacting our elected officials and asking them the right questions.
One of the problems with buses is that they're so long-lived. So I think on average, buses are kept for 15 years, which puts us into 2040 almost. And many buses are kept in operation for 20 years, at which point even clean diesel will be very, very dirty. They just deteriorate in time as to how well they're functioning and how clean they are. So we're each bus we purchase is putting us down the road farther toward climate change.
That is right. So is there any other questions from our attendees here? If you want to unmute and ask your question right here, you're welcome to do that. Sharanjit, you had some questions. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask it here? I don't know.
One of the questions I had put in the chat, and Alison did answer that question in the chat itself. And I did hear about that from others also. They alluded to that. The one thing that I might like to ask Dick is that, considering that, some of the initiatives that you talked about were taken, more than a decade back here in Delaware. So besides economic reasons, was there any other reasons also because of which there was not a mass implementation of those?
So I hear all kinds of things, okay? If you really want to object to electric buses, it's not just the cost of the electric bus. The utility will say, well, we can't support the electric bus, or they're not in the right area. The other one I heard is, in 70 years, the half of Delaware is going to flood, so why should we invest now? So I've heard everything in the world, but the real problem is just the cost, and it's really the acceptance of the state to say, we want to do this. Because all the other states that I deal with, which are around us, all have electric buses, all are actively going after it. Maryland has 50 they're committed to. New Jersey has 20. The state of Pennsylvania just got 5. They're a little behind, but you start going up, and New York is very active. So we're just not looking ahead. And I think Anna brings up a perfect question is, these things are running around for 10 or 12 years or longer. So, if you're going to move forward with clean air, now's the time to start looking at it, especially if the funding's available. So I think, what my hope is meetings like this and some others that'll be coming up might force the issue a little harder. I'm trying to push as hard as I can. And as I said, we're more than happy as a company to offer our services to try to get you a bus or a truck or whatever. We're into electric vehicles. So, and as the money comes out, we're happy to write and try to apply for it. I'm not, as you can tell, I'm not selling the bus, but I'm really an advocate of the health issue.
Thanks, Dick. We're so fortunate to have you work on this issue here in Delaware with us, and you've you're welcoming people who are working with school districts. So I know you mentioned to me that you have helped a couple of schools write some grants. Can you talk in detail about that? And how can someone who's here attending this panel, if they're interested, how can they reach out to you?
So we have our grant writer on right now. So why don't I let her answer that question, Tiffany Hammond. So go ahead, Tiffany.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Hammond, and this webinar has made me so excited. So to share what I do, I work with Nuvi, and I have 10 years of federal grant consulting experience, and I like to call myself the turnkey solution for all your grant needs. So I will help you with your needs analysis. I will help you create your application, submit your application. Our goal is to get more electric school buses on the roads to make the air healthier for our children and a better environment. And to spread vehicle to grid technology, which creates a resilient grid, a reliable grid, and I'm here to help you. So my email, and I will put it in the chat, is thammond@nuvi.com, and you can reach out and we can get started.
So Tiffany, maybe you want to talk a little bit about Red Clay and Woodbridge since you wrote those.
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully we'll be finding out soon if we got those grants for the school district. And also I worked with Tim that's on here as well and is one of our panelists. So through the process, we collaborate and we're able to get your application in a very timely manner, and pretty much whatever you need, we can make happen with funding.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. I have a question because I live in Pennsylvania and I've been talking to my school district of how we can do that. What they have asked me is, and that might be relevant to some of the people that are attending, that, it's not like, it's a wealthy school district. So are they still able to apply for funding, or they have to wait because there is that equity piece that we want to help those school districts who are going through more of the fossil fuel pollution because of more concentration of diesel buses? Or can the school districts which have more, which are not in those redlining areas can still apply for funding?
You can definitely still apply for funding. With the clean school bus rebates, it will be a lottery system. Possibly, from my understanding, we'll know more April 27th. Everyone should apply. What I like to say about grants and funding, it's always free to apply. So get in there and get your applications in.
Thanks, Tiffany.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I know there was somebody was raising their hand. Is that Janet? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thanks so much for this great panel. My question is about what would be the best strategy to use here in Delaware to get this ball rolling, because with the application being due in May, today is April 21st, we're really behind the 8 ball. And if our strategy is to go to each of the school districts in the state of Delaware, this is, it seems to me, an impossible task. What different strategy could be developed utilizing not only DNREC and the Department of Education, but also the Division of Public Health? Is there some way, some people that we can get on this right away to activate this so that we could take advantage of this?
Well, the key to the whole thing. So look at the school buses in Delaware. Many of them are contractor driven, which means that they're operating on a for-profit basis and trying to figure it out. In fact, most of the school districts other than Red Clay and Woodbridge and a couple others don't operate their own buses. They contract their buses out, which makes it more difficult. And I've approached the contractors, but unless the education department gives them some kind of depreciation or expense towards the operation of that bus at the price it is, and they get a grant, it just is going to be very difficult. But we keep trying. So the whole issue lies in the state. It lies in DNREC has to make a decision, and the state education group has to make a decision that they want to embrace it and move forward. So, and the sad part is Senator Carper's the one that got the infrastructure bill passed, and we can't even get a bus in Delaware. There is one bus in Delaware. It's at the neighborhood center in Wilmington. That was purchased on VW funds. So that's the only electric vehicle that is a bus in the state right now.
But Dick, my question is, even if DNREC is on board with this and the Department of Education, how can they can't force?
No, I think there's a big groundswell. Tim can talk to this too. We talk about this every once in a while. The people that are driving this whole electric bus initiative from a health issue and a social justice issue are parents and children. And it's the parents and children that are driving this whole initiative. You just have to listen to Anna's talk and you're convinced if you have a child, you don't want them riding in that bus. So, so I think the groundswell of people will drive it. And then if the money's available, then you can't really say, well, we're not going to do it because we don't think it's economically possible at this point in time when the money's available. So I'm hoping, you know, we just keep pushing a little bit more.
The only viable argument against school bus electrification is the financial argument. Do the dollars and cents make sense? To clarify something, the Clean School Bus program, the application window we anticipate will open in May, but it will be open for 3 months. So really June and July are the important months. And however you can establish any type of a coalition or make a little bit of a headway with a school board, with a superintendent, with a transportation director, I think you do. Because what we anticipate, and Tiffany could correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, if she were on, we'll know more about this program soon. We anticipate for an electric school bus, there to be funding in the amounts approaching $300,000 per bus. For us, I've got the mathematical reality. I can show what our diesel prices have been over the last 8 years. And if that trend continues with us having solar on site and we're locked into a solar power purchasing agreement, we'll save in 10 years use of an electric bus, we'll save $90,000 in fuel costs. We estimate that we'll save $20,000 in maintenance costs. You know, so if you get a $300,000 grant for an electric school bus and you're going to save $90,000 in fuel, $20,000 in maintenance, financially, you're money ahead. And now you have an energy asset on your property that could be used for other purposes as the area really expands electrification. As soon as, I think it was Anna that was saying, you lock into if you get a brand new propane or compressed natural gas or a diesel bus, you're going to have it 10 or 15 years. And the rest of the world's going to electrify, and you're still going to be using your yellow school buses to move kids around when everybody else is, the other 90% of the time, using them to provide ancillary services to either their building or their grid. Yeah, a lot of it. So right now is the time to do it because the federal incentives are never going to be this large again. It doesn't matter what happens to the price of the bus, it's going to drop, but the incentives, the ratio is never going to be this high as far as incentives go. And that's the only argument against electrification is cost.
Thank you, Tim. That was just amazing. I think a lot of people need to hear that. You know, especially as a superintendent, how you've put it about the cost. You know, to say if the funding is there and if we can get access to that funding, there can be no other objection for not going with that. So
can I add one thing too?
Yeah, sure.
I really apologize, but this is an important thing to mention. The Edwards Settlement Fund started with help from a class of students, one teacher and a group of students at Pekin High School. They helped to go around Pekin to pull the community, and they helped make that settlement fund happen. In our community, our solar array happened because our kids on our STEM team put together the presentation. They pulled the people in our community that live nearby the array. They did the work. They did the research, and they presented to our community why this was a benefit to us. That's, you know, a lot of times in a lot of districts, it can just start with a group of kids, one teacher, one class. Because if you have 3 kids with asthma that ride the school bus, go to a school board meeting and say, hey, this makes financial sense also, who's going to turn those kids down?
Brilliant point. And I think this issue can resonate so well with young people who are riding this. This is like climate change, right? It is such a youth-centric issue because they will be the one who will be facing the consequences of inaction today, and who are actually, who are in the forefront. And same with riding those buses. Who are riding the bus? Who's riding the bus, right? So these students are riding the bus day in and day out. And what a great point that, involving young people in our schools. So when we are talking about forming coalition, having these youth join this coalition and put forward this perspective to the school district, making a case for, electric school bus transition, that here there is funding available. These are the health stats, and we don't want to be sitting in these polluting bus anymore. So thank you for making that point. And I think John Irvin has a question. John, if you want to unmute.
Yeah. So what's the ask for for DNREC and the Department of Education? If we want to go to them, what are we asking them to do?
We're asking them to allow them to put electric school buses on the depreciation schedule. That's all we're asking them to do. They're going to tell you that, well, it's too expensive, but they could always put into it if there's a grant. The other thing is, we offer, and a lot of companies offer financing for the whole thing. They offer a turnkey solution. So basically all you're doing is paying a certain cost per mile on the vehicle. So over a 12-year period of time. So there's options out there, but you just have to open it up and say, okay, we'll let electric school buses come in. But that has to be the education department to do that. It was very difficult. I was involved in propane. I hate to say this, but I was. And it took forever to get the education department to put propane on the list. So.
And John, if you need to, you can make the argument that in Illinois, the state board allows for, they treat an electric bus, the capital expense of the electric bus or the charging equipment the same as they treat a fuel tank or a diesel bus. Everything's reimbursed at the same rate.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So we are getting to our point here. It's top of the hour here, but I just want to give you a minute each to get us any closing thought that you might have for people who are attending. We can start with Anna.
Well, I'm so thankful to have been able to speak with Francine and Dick and Tim and you, Shweta, as well by my side, and Allison. It is just wonderful to connect to others who care. I think that as everyone who's here watching and listening tonight has noticed, we have not yet coalesced into a coalition. Energized, hoping to be part of efforts, and I'm not 100% sure which direction we're heading in, but hopefully we can, Shweta will have everyone's name, so maybe we can find some energy among this group tonight. So thanks everyone for being here and for sharing your interests.
Thanks, Anna. And that is my hope that we can do that. There are a lot of individuals here who are excited about this and a lot of groups here, and we definitely can start a coalition. And I think with climate action, we need speed and we need scale to really make this big impact. And that can only happen with coalition building. So Dick, do you want to say any last words?
I just feel like I should have thought of coalition before this meeting. So I've been running from place to place. So yeah, I think that would be very helpful for us to have a coalition. I know that Peggy Schultz and Anna and the people in the league have been driving it from that direction. But I think if we focused a group of people on a coalition, that would make a difference too.
Stay. Tim? What are your last thoughts?
I've got two thoughts. One, I equate school bus electrification to planting a tree, right? And it's nice to have Dick on the line so that it makes sense. The best time to do it was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. There's going to be a window of, a big bucket of money that we'll never see again for school bus electrification. It's going to open soon. The advocacy that you can, the doors you can knock on, the people you can talk to in the next 8 weeks is crucial. A lot of folks have worked hard to make sure the application process is simple, and I'm convinced it's really going to be. There are a lot of really thoughtful people working at the EPA that are putting this grant out in the form of rebates, which makes it something you don't have to, it gets rid of the upfront cost burden. The second thing I want to make sure that I emphasize is just electrification itself is missing the boat. So when folks are writing these grants, get the DC fast charger that also has V2G capabilities. There are benefits just alone with the DC fast charger, but having a bi-directional capacity to your charger can unlock the potential of that big energy asset of the bus. And in those same lines, the infrastructure money is there to build out charging infrastructure in the state of Delaware. Schools can be, in my view, I'm a lifelong educator. My mom was a grade school teacher, so on and so forth. Schools should be the hubs. They're the ones that are going to drive this change. If you have a couple charge stations for employees and students on each of your public school lots, that's going to accelerate electrification efforts in the state of Delaware. So
Very true.
Wonderful points. Thank you, Tim. Those were really insightful. Francine.
Yes, I'm just sitting here. I've taken so many notes, and I'm just so happy to hear and learn and share with everyone. And Shweta, thank you so much for putting this together, for organizing this event. From the panelists to the folks who joined us as guests, we're all passionate about doing better, making our earth a better place for us to live, and for the future of our children, who we've been talking about, have been the focus of this discussion. We've seen the tangible loss of life with this whole pandemic. We're now seeing the effects of a war outside of our borders, and the irreversible destruction of our planet that we have to wrap our arms around. At this point in our advocacy, at this point in our goal of creating a just and equitable climate, and it can feel like we don't know which way is up or which way is down. We don't know the best strategy to take sometimes, or who are the best people to help us in this uphill battle, in this fight that we're in. So sometimes we, the change makers, the advocators, we wonder if it's even worth it. Is the work that we're doing, is it going to make a difference, right? So for those of us standing up to fight back against this these unjust institutions, these advocating against systemic oppression, the fight can be exhausting. So I urge you to take care of yourselves. When the bill doesn't pass, and after months of advocating, don't give up the fight. It's heartbreaking to think of climate issues that our children may have to deal with if we give up. So please, please don't give up. I love this idea of coalition and working together, the coalition and working. I've partnered with Shweta on several different events. She is walking with me arm in arm as we just received a climate grant in our district, and as United Women in Faith, and we're lofty enough and bold enough to think that we can take on the new Amazon plant that just moved into a small marginalized community on the outskirts of Wilmington. These folks see these tractor trailers coming through constantly, all the little minivans that Amazon pushes through this small community, and we want to make sure that they remain safe. So we're going to teach them to advocate for themselves. Every person has a right to clean air. We have to take care of our earth and of ourselves. So please, let's just gather together and rally around each other to get this work done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francine. Very well said. And, at Delaware IPL, that's what we are working towards every day, for a better planet for us and for our future generation who deserve, a good, clean air and clean environment and clean water, who have not done anything, to deserve a inhabitable planet. So thank you so much, everyone. A special thank you to our panelists for joining us for this really robust discussion. And I hope it will result in forming some kind of a coalition where a lot of different school districts can start this process together. And as Tim had pointed out, this is a crucial time. We have a window of some 8-10 weeks. Let's make sure that we are on it and we really make things happen here in Delaware. So for that note, I just want to thank you all for your expertise. I have put in the chat, we are working with a coalition of different organizations on declaring a climate emergency in Delaware, and asking for bold climate action from our elected officials. I've put the link in the chat. If you can please take a minute to write to your elected official why you would want to see bold action on climate change here in Delaware. Delaware DNREC has released their Delaware Climate Action Plan last fall with a really low targets. And we have the most polluted air here in Delaware. And the dirtiest water, there was a report that recently came out saying that Delaware has the dirtiest waterways in all of the country. We really need to step up our game, and transportation is part of it. So hopefully we can really stir some action here. And these climate conversations are a great place to start because we need to talk about them. And then keep acting on them. So thank you so much for joining us. And we hope to see you again.
Thanks, Shweta.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.